I'm signing Loki Stone's performance improvement plan, and my hands won't stop shaking. Not because I'm nervous, because I'm trying not to smile. This is the same man who told me 8 years ago that I wasn't management material. The same man who blocked every single promotion I deserved, who made me watch less qualified people climb over me while he sat there with that smug grin saying I needed more development time. And now I'm his direct supervisor, and he has to sit across from this conference table while I outline his new responsibilities under my leadership. The irony is so thick I can barely breathe. 8 years of being told I wasn't ready. 8 years of watching him sabotage my career while pretending to mentor me. 8 years of believing maybe he was right about me. And here we are, him reporting to me, asking permission for vacation days, waiting for my approval on his projects. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock on your door, sometimes it kicks it down. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The email notification sound still makes my stomach drop, even though I'm the one sending them now. 23 new messages in my inbox marked urgent, and every single one of them is requesting my approval. Budget approvals, personnel decisions, strategic planning sessions, all waiting for my digital signature. All from people who used to barely acknowledge my existence in the hallway. But the one that matters most, the one I've been waiting 8 years to see, sits at the top of my priority folder. Subject line: Weekly Status Report, L. Stone to X, Hayes Regional Director. Loki Stone, reporting to me, Ura Hayes, his boss. I should feel victorious. I should feel that sweet taste of justice that everyone talks about in those motivational posts about persistence paying off. Instead, I feel empty. Like I've been holding my breath for so long that when I finally exhale, there's nothing left inside. Let me back up, because if I don't tell this story right, if I don't get every detail exactly as it happened, I'm going to lose my mind. And maybe, just maybe, if I say it all out loud, I'll figure out why getting everything I ever wanted feels like the most hollow victory of my life. My name is Zyra Hayes. I'm 34 years old, and until 6 months ago, I was absolutely convinced that if you worked hard enough, if you stayed loyal enough, if you proved your worth beyond any reasonable doubt, the system would eventually reward you. I believed that merit mattered more than politics, that dedication trumped everything else, and that good managers genuinely wanted to see their employees succeed. I was wrong about everything. Before I go any further, please, and I mean this, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because I need to know I'm not losing my mind here. I need to know there are other people out there who've been gaslit so completely by their workplace that they started questioning their own worth, their own competence, their own reality. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever had a boss who smiled to your face while systematically destroying your career behind closed doors. Because right now, sitting in this corner office that should feel like a victory, I feel more alone than I've ever felt in my life. 8 years. 8 years I worked in the Pacific Northwest regional office of Meridian Financial Solutions, one of those mid-tier consulting firms that thinks having a ping-pong table in the break room makes up for toxic management practices. 8 years. I believed Loki Stone when he said he was developing my potential and preparing me for bigger things. 8 years I trusted him when he explained why this promotion wasn't quite right for me, why that opportunity needed someone with more experience, why maybe next quarter would be better timing. 8 years of watching him promote less qualified people while telling me I needed more seasoning. The building directory by the elevator tells the whole story if you know how to read it. 17th floor, executive leadership. 16th floor, senior management. 15th floor, regional directors. That's where my office is now, corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Columbia River. My name etched in glass beside the title that took me 8 years to earn. And 3 floors down on the 12th, in a windowless interior office between the copy room and the supply closet, sits Loki Stone, senior project manager, reporting directly to me. The reversal is so complete it feels surreal. Last year at this time, I was begging him for approval to attend a leadership conference. Not in the budget this quarter, Zyra. Maybe next year when you're ready for more responsibility. This morning I cut his travel budget by 30% and reassigned his biggest client to someone more capable, someone who actually shows up to client meetings prepared instead of winging it with charm and empty promises. But here's the thing that's eating me alive, the thing I can't stop thinking about as I sit in this office that represents everything I thought I wanted. I didn't get here because the system finally recognized my worth. I didn't get promoted because merit won out over politics. I got here because Meridian Financial was acquired by Pinnacle Consulting, and Pinnacle's CEO Diana Chen. Yes, I know, different Chen from the other story, but apparently that's just a common name in executive circles, had a very different perspective on talent management. She took one look at our regional performance metrics, one look at who was actually generating revenue versus who was taking credit for it, and she didn't just restructure the department. She flipped it completely upside down. Suddenly, the people who'd been quietly carrying the load while their managers played golf with clients were the ones getting promoted. The people who'd been not quite ready for years were the ones being fast-tracked into leadership roles, and the people who'd been holding others back? Well, let's just say Pinnacle has very specific ideas about what constitutes effective management. I should be celebrating, I should be calling my parents, posting on LinkedIn about perseverance paying off, maybe even splurging on that expensive bottle of wine I've been saving for a special occasion. Instead, I'm sitting here at 9:30 on a Tuesday night, alone in my new office, trying to figure out why vindication feels so much like grief. Maybe it's because I spent so many years believing Loki was right about me. Maybe it's because part of me still wonders if I deserve this office, this title, this authority. Or maybe it's because getting everything you've ever wanted by watching your former boss get everything he deserves forces you to confront some uncomfortable truths about power, about justice, and about the person you become when you finally get the chance to even the score. Tomorrow, Loki has his first quarterly performance review under my supervision. I've been dreading it and anticipating it in equal measure. Because after 8 years of him holding my career in his hands, I finally get to hold his in mine, and I'm not sure which one of us should be more afraid of what that means. Let me properly introduce myself, because I realize I jumped straight into the deep end without giving you the context you need to understand how spectacularly I misjudged everything about my career, my boss, and my own worth. My name is Zebra Hayes, and I'm the daughter of 2 people who believed so deeply in the American dream that they named their only daughter after a constellation, something bright and distant and aspirational. My parents, both first-generation immigrants from Greece, owned a small restaurant in Bellingham called the Olive Branch, and they worked 16-hour days for 30 years to make sure I could have the white-collar career they never had the chance to pursue. Education is the one thing no one can take from you. My mother used to say while balancing the books at 2 a.m., her fingers stained with ink and exhaustion, "Work hard, be honest, and people will see your value." I believed her. God, I believed her so completely. I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Washington with a double major in finance and business administration. I had internships, recommendations, a pristine GPA, and this unshakable faith that merit was the only currency that mattered in professional settings. I thought racism and sexism were things that happened to other people, in other industries, in other generations. I thought if you just worked twice as hard as everyone else and never gave anyone a reason to doubt your competence, success was inevitable. I was 26 years old and so naive it hurts to remember. When I started at Meridian Financial Solutions 8 years ago, I was hungry in a way that only comes from watching your parents sacrifice everything for your opportunities. I showed up early, stayed late, volunteered for projects no one else wanted, and treated every assignment like it was the most important thing in the world, because to me, it was. This job represented everything my parents had worked for, everything I'd studied for, everything I'd dreamed about while watching my mother count quarters from the tip jar, and Loki Stone seemed like everything I could aspire to become. He was 32 then, the youngest regional manager in company history, with this easy confidence that made clients trust him instantly and executives remember his name. He wore expensive suits that fit perfectly, drove a Tesla Model S, and had this way of making you feel like you were part of an exclusive club just by talking to you. More importantly, or so I thought, he was genuinely interested in developing talent. He talked about mentorship, about lifting others up, about creating a legacy through the people you guide. "I see something special in you, Zyra," he told me after my first month. "You have the analytical skills and work ethic to go far in this company. I want to make sure you get there." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Those words, "I want to make sure you get there," became my North Star for the next 8 years. Looking back now, I can see how perfectly I fit the profile of someone ripe for long-term manipulation. I was ambitious but insecure, hard-working but inexperienced, grateful for any guidance and terrified of disappointing anyone. I came from a family where respect for authority was absolute, where questioning your boss was unthinkable, where being selected for mentorship was an honor you earned through unwavering loyalty. I was the perfect mark, but I didn't know that then. Then I just knew I was lucky to work for someone who saw my potential and was willing to invest in my development. When Loki started giving me additional responsibilities, client research, project coordination, presentation development, I saw it as proof that I was on the right track. When he began having me sit in on senior-level meetings as a learning observer, I felt chosen. When he started asking me to handle his overflow work because I trust your judgment more than anyone else's, I felt indispensable. What I didn't realize was that he was systematically positioning me as his unofficial assistant while blocking every pathway to official advancement. The first time I applied for a promotion, senior financial analyst, a natural progression from my current role, Loki was incredibly supportive. "Absolutely," he said. "You're definitely ready for more responsibility. Let me walk your application through the process personally." 3 weeks later, unfortunately, they went with external candidate. But don't worry, this just means we need to position you better for the next opportunity. Let's focus on developing your presentation skills. The second time, 18 months later. The timing isn't quite right. The department is going through some restructuring, and they want someone with more experience managing client relationships, but I have a plan for getting you there. The third time, you're absolutely qualified, but they're looking for someone with more strategic thinking experience. I want to start giving you more exposure to high-level planning so you'll be undeniable next time. The fourth, fifth, sixth times, always a reason, always a plan, always next time. And I believed him. Every single time, I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because questioning his judgment felt like questioning the entire foundation of everything I'd worked for. If Loki Stone, the most successful person I knew, said I wasn't ready, then I must not be ready. If he said I needed more development, then I must need more development. I spent 8 years trying to become worthy of opportunities I already deserved. 8 years accepting explanations that should have been red flags. 8 years watching less qualified people, almost exclusively men, get promoted around me, while I was told to be patient, to trust the process, to keep proving myself. 8 years believing that if I just worked a little harder, stayed a little later, delivered a little more, eventually I'd earn the advancement that everyone else seemed to stumble into effortlessly. I was 34 years old before I realized that the system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed, and I was never supposed to be one of its beneficiaries. The worst part? Part of me still wonders if he was right about me all along. Meridian Financial Solutions occupied 12 floors of the Cascade Tower in downtown Seattle, one of those glass and steel monuments to corporate ambition that pierced the Pacific Northwest skyline. From the outside, it looked exactly like what I'd dreamed of during my college years. Sleek, modern, successful, the kind of place where serious business happened, where careers were built, where someone like me could transform years of education into meaningful professional impact. The lobby was all polished marble and contemporary art, with a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Digital displays rotated through company achievements. Meridian Financial 15 years of strategic excellence, recognized leader in regional business consulting, committed to developing tomorrow's financial leaders. That last one always made me smile during my first few years there. I genuinely believed I was looking at my future. The elevator ride to the 10th floor where the financial analysis department lived was always silent in the morning, filled with caffeine-dependent professionals in various stages of consciousness. But there was an energy there, a sense of shared purpose that made the early mornings and long hours feel worthwhile. We were building something together, contributing to something larger than ourselves. Or so I thought. The financial analysis department was structured like a small kingdom, with clearly defined hierarchies and unspoken rules about advancement. At the bottom were junior analysts, recent graduates hungry to prove themselves. Above them, senior analysts who'd earned their stripes through 2 to 3 years of dedicated service. Then came lead analysts, the ones trusted with high-profile clients and complex projects. And at the top, overseeing it all with the authority of regional management, was Loki Stone. Loki's office was corner-positioned on the 10th floor, with windows facing both west toward the Olympic Mountains and south toward Mount Rainier. It was decorated with carefully chosen pieces that communicated success without ostentation. Framed degrees from Stanford and Wharton, awards from industry organizations, and a few tasteful pieces of Pacific Northwest art that suggested cultural sophistication. His desk was always immaculately organized, not a paper out of place, not a coffee stain anywhere to be seen. But it was the wall behind his desk that really told the story of who Loki Stone was, or who he wanted people to think he was. Photographs of him with C-suite executives from major corporations, handshake moments captured at industry conferences, group shots from exclusive business retreats, and prominently displayed in the center, a large framed photo of the entire financial analysis team from my second year, 12 people arranged around a conference table, all smiling, all looking toward Loki at the head of the table like he was some kind of benevolent leader guiding us toward collective success. I'm in that photo, third from the left, beaming with the kind of genuine enthusiasm that makes me cringe now. I believed so completely in what that photo represented. Mentorship, opportunity, meritocracy in action. The department culture that Loki cultivated was sophisticated in its manipulation. He never ruled through fear or intimidation. Instead, he created an environment where his approval became the most valuable currency in our professional lives. He had this way of making you feel specially chosen, like you were part of an inner circle that not everyone got to access. I only share this level of strategic thinking with people I trust, he'd say, pulling you into his office for what felt like confidential conversations about company direction and department planning. Most people in this organization just want to do their assigned tasks and go home. But you, Zira, you think about the bigger picture. He was masterful at creating artificial scarcity around opportunities. There was always just one spot available for the leadership training program, just one opening for the high-visibility client project, just one chance to present to senior management. And somehow, you had to earn the right to be considered by proving your loyalty to him personally. "I go to bat for my people," was his favorite phrase, but I can only advocate for the ones who show me they're committed to excellence. The department operated on what he called collaborative mentorship. Every project was framed as a learning opportunity. Every assignment positioned as professional development. When he gave you additional responsibilities beyond your job description, it wasn't exploitation, it was investment in your future. When he asked you to work weekends or skip lunch breaks, it wasn't unreasonable demand, it was a sign that you were trusted with mission-critical work, and the results seemed to speak for themselves. The financial analysis department consistently exceeded performance targets. Client satisfaction scores were among the highest in the company. Employee retention was remarkably stable, especially compared to other departments where people seemed to burn out and leave regularly. What I didn't understand then was that high retention isn't always a sign of great leadership. Sometimes it's a sign of learned helplessness. Loki had this remarkable talent for identifying people's professional insecurities and then positioning himself as the solution. For me, it was my background. Despite my academic achievements, I was acutely aware that I didn't come from the same privileged circumstances as many of my colleagues. I didn't have family connections in the business world, didn't go to prep schools where networking began in adolescence, didn't have trust funds that allowed me to take unpaid internships at prestigious firms. "That's actually your advantage," Loki told me during one of our early mentoring conversations. "You understand hard work in a way that people who've had everything handed to them never will. I came up the hard way too, and that's why I recognize the drive in you. That's why I'm going to make sure you don't get overlooked the way I was when I was starting out." He made me feel like we were allies in a system that might otherwise work against people like us. He painted himself as my advocate, my champion, the one person in the organization who truly understood my potential and was committed to helping me realize it. Looking back, I can see how carefully he constructed that narrative, how he identified exactly what I needed to hear and fed it to me in perfectly calibrated doses. How he created a relationship dynamic where questioning his guidance felt like betraying not just a mentor, but an ally who was taking personal and professional risks to advance my career. For 8 years, I believed that Loki Stone was the best thing that had ever happened to my professional development. I was so grateful for his mentorship that I never stopped to ask why none of his other mentees ever seemed to advance beyond senior analyst level. The transformation happened so gradually that I didn't recognize it was happening at all. What started as occasional extra assignments became my unofficial second job. What began as collaborative learning opportunities evolved into me essentially functioning as Loki's deputy, while maintaining the title and salary of a senior financial analyst. But Loki had this gift for making increased responsibility feel like privilege rather than exploitation. "I'm going to start bringing you into the quarterly strategic planning sessions," he announced during my third year, settling into the chair across from my desk with that characteristic smile that made you feel like you'd just been selected for something special. It's not standard for analysts to participate at that level, but I've been talking to upper management about your potential. They need to see what I see in you. Those planning sessions were held in the executive conference room on the 15th floor, a world away from the cubicle farm where most analysts spent their days. Floor-to-ceiling windows, Italian leather chairs, a conference table that probably cost more than my annual salary. Sitting in that room, listening to discussions about company direction and departmental budgets, I felt like I was finally getting a glimpse of where my career was headed. "Take notes," Loki would whisper as we walked in. Not just on the content, but on how these conversations flow, how decisions get made at this level. You're getting a masterclass in executive leadership that most people don't access until they're already in management roles. I took those notes religiously, filled notebook after notebook with observations about communication styles, decision-making processes, and strategic thinking patterns. I studied those sessions like they were graduate courses in business leadership, convinced that Loki was accelerating my professional development in ways that would pay off spectacularly once I was ready for promotion. The promises became more specific as my responsibilities expanded. "I'm restructuring the department next year," he told me during my annual review in year 4, "creating a new associate manager position that will report directly to me. It's basically a deputy role, someone who can handle the operational details while I focus on strategic relationships. I've already started socializing your name for it with the executive team. Associate manager. My own office, my own direct reports, a 40% salary increase, and most importantly, a clear pathway to full management within 2 years. I'd never wanted anything more in my professional life. The key is proving you can handle management-level responsibilities before you officially have the title," Loki explained. "I want to start giving you oversight of the junior analysts, let you take point on client relationship management, involve you in budget planning. When the position gets posted, you'll be the obvious choice because you'll already be doing the job." So I started doing the job, all of it. I managed the schedules and workloads of 6 junior analysts, conducting informal performance reviews, and providing guidance on professional development. I took over client communications for 3 major accounts, becoming the primary point of contact for day-to-day issues while Loki maintained the strategic relationships. I prepared budget proposals, analyzed departmental efficiency metrics, and developed process improvement recommendations that consistently exceeded targets. The personal sacrifices accumulated like compound interest. Weekend client calls became routine. Family dinners were rescheduled around last-minute project deadlines. I missed my cousin's wedding because we were in the middle of a critical quarterly review. I canceled a planned vacation to Greece, the first time I'd had enough money saved to visit my extended family, because Loki needed me to cover a client emergency. "I hate asking this of you," he said, and his regret seemed genuine. "But the Pinnacle Industries account is threatening to walk, and you're the only one who understands their portfolio well enough to salvage this relationship. Take the vacation next quarter, and I'll make sure you get an extra week approved. This is exactly the kind of crisis management that will demonstrate your executive potential." I rescheduled the trip. Pinnacle Industries stayed, and somehow there was always another crisis, another opportunity to prove myself, another chance to demonstrate that I was ready for more responsibility. The most insidious part was how Loki made me complicit in my own exploitation by framing everything as investment in my future. When I worked 60-hour weeks, it wasn't because the department was understaffed, it was because I was building a portfolio of achievements that would make my promotion undeniable. When I covered his responsibilities during his frequent business trips, it wasn't because he was delegating inappropriately, it was because he trusted me with mission-critical work that would showcase my leadership capabilities to senior management. "You're already functioning as my deputy," he told me during year 5. "When the associate manager position gets approved, and it will, I'm just waiting for the right budget cycle. The transition will be seamless. You'll slide right into the role because you've already been doing it." But the position never got approved. Budget constraints, he explained. Organizational restructuring, changes in company priorities. Always something external, always something beyond his control, always temporary. "Don't worry," he assured me each time. "This actually works in our favor. You're getting management experience without the political complications that come with official titles. When the next opportunity comes up, and there will be bigger opportunities coming, you'll be undeniably qualified." By year 6, I was essentially running the day-to-day operations of the entire financial analysis department. I prepared performance reviews for the junior staff, managed client relationships worth millions in annual revenue, and developed strategic initiatives that consistently exceeded company targets. I had the responsibilities of a department manager, the expertise of a senior executive, and the salary of someone 3 levels below where I should have been. But I had something else too. Loki's repeated assurances that my time was coming, that he was positioning me for something bigger than associate manager, that my loyalty and patience were building toward a payoff that would exceed my wildest expectations. Regional director, he said during one of our private strategy sessions. That's where I see you in 2 years. Skip the incremental promotions and go straight to executive level. I'm already having conversations about succession planning, and your name is at the top of my list. Regional director, the 15th floor, my own department to run, everything I'd ever wanted, finally within reach. I believed him completely. After 6 years of promises and preparation, after countless demonstrations of trust and capability, after sacrificing personal relationships and family time and financial security, I was finally going to get everything I'd worked for. I just had to be patient a little bit longer. Year 7 was supposed to be my year. Everything Loki had been building toward, everything I'd been working for, finally crystallized into what he called the opportunity of a lifetime. Meridian just landed the Morrison healthcare contract, Loki announced during our Monday morning one-on-one, barely able to contain his excitement. $15 million account, complete financial restructuring for their entire Pacific Northwest operations. This is the biggest deal our regional office has ever closed. Morrison Healthcare was a regional hospital network that had been struggling with operational inefficiencies and budget shortfalls for years. They needed someone to completely overhaul their financial systems, streamline their procurement processes, and develop a sustainable budget model that could handle their expansion plans while improving patient care quality. It was exactly the kind of complex, high-stakes project that could define careers. Here's the thing, Loki continued, leaning forward with that expression I'd learned to recognize as the prelude to something significant. Corporate wants to use this as a pilot program for our new integrated consulting model. Instead of just providing financial analysis, we're going to offer comprehensive operational consulting. If we succeed here, it becomes the template for how Meridian approaches major healthcare clients nationwide. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just another client project. It was potentially the foundation for an entirely new division within the company. The kind of initiative that creates vice presidencies and launches careers into the executive stratosphere. I want you to lead it, Loki said, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. Not as project coordinator or senior analyst, as project leader. Your name at the top of every report, your strategy guiding every decision, your relationship with the client driving everything forward. This was it. This was the moment 8 years of preparation had been building toward. After years of doing management-level work without management-level recognition, I was finally going to get the opportunity to prove my capabilities on a scale that would make my qualifications undeniable. The executive team will be watching this project closely, Loki explained. Diana Chen herself specifically requested quarterly updates. If we deliver what Morrison Healthcare needs, and I know we will, you'll be positioned for immediate promotion to regional director. Not in 2 years, not when the next budget cycle opens up. Immediately. Regional director. Everything I'd dreamed about since my first day at Meridian. My own floor, my own department, direct access to executive leadership, the salary that would finally allow me to pay off my student loans and help my parents retire, the title that would validate every sacrifice I'd made, every weekend I'd worked, every family gathering I'd missed. There's just one thing, Loki added, and something in his tone made me pay closer attention. Because this is such a high-visibility project, corporate wants me to maintain oversight responsibility, official project leadership, but with me as supervising manager. Think of it as training wheels for your first major leadership role. Training wheels. After 7 years of proving my capabilities, after managing complex projects and client relationships independently, after essentially running department operations while he focused on strategic networking, I still needed training wheels. But I understood the logic. Morrison Healthcare was too important to risk on what corporate would see as an unproven leader. Having Loki's name attached provided the credibility and risk mitigation that a $15 million client demanded. It was pragmatic, even if it stung. Once we deliver results, Loki assured me, there won't be any question about your readiness for independent leadership. This project will be your portfolio piece for the next decade. I threw myself into Morrison Healthcare with an intensity that surprised even me. I spent 3 weeks conducting preliminary research, analyzing their existing financial systems, interviewing department heads across all their facilities, and developing a comprehensive understanding of their operational challenges that went deeper than anything Meridian had ever delivered for a client. The problems were complex but solvable. Morrison Healthcare was hemorrhaging money through inefficient procurement processes, redundant administrative structures, and outdated financial reporting systems that made strategic planning nearly impossible. They needed technological upgrades, staff retraining, and a complete reorganization of their budget allocation processes. I developed an 18-month implementation plan that addressed every identified issue while maintaining operational continuity. I created detailed financial projections showing how the initial investment in consulting fees would generate cost savings exceeding $8 million annually within 3 years. I designed training protocols for their staff, timeline frameworks for technological implementation, and risk mitigation strategies for every potential complication. It was the most comprehensive consulting proposal I'd ever developed, and it was brilliant. I knew it was brilliant because I'd never worked harder or thought more strategically about anything in my professional life. The client presentation was scheduled for a Thursday morning in Morrison Healthcare's main conference room. I prepared for weeks, anticipating every possible question, rehearsing every transition, timing every section to maintain engagement while covering essential details. I created visual aids that made complex financial data accessible, case studies that demonstrated proven methodologies, and implementation timelines that balanced ambition with realism. The night before the presentation, I was in the office until 2 a.m., making final adjustments and running through my delivery one last time. Loki stopped by around midnight, bringing coffee and encouragement. "You're going to be spectacular tomorrow," he said, reviewing my materials with obvious admiration. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking that corporate needs to see from future leadership. Morrison Healthcare is going to love this proposal, and Diana Chen is going to remember your name." I went home that night convinced that everything was finally aligned. 7 years of preparation, months of intensive research, weeks of meticulous planning, all culminating in a presentation that would demonstrate my capabilities beyond any reasonable doubt. By Friday afternoon, I'd be regional director-elect, with Morrison Healthcare as my first major account, and a clear pathway to executive leadership. I should have known that nothing in my career with Loki Stone had ever been that straightforward. Wednesday evening, 18 hours before the presentation that was supposed to change my life, Loki called me at home. I was in the middle of final preparation, reviewing my notes one last time before getting a full night's sleep. "We need to talk," he said, and something in his voice made my stomach drop. "Can you come in early tomorrow? Before the Morrison meeting?" "Is everything okay?" I asked, already knowing that everything was not okay. "Just some last-minute adjustments," he said. "Nothing major. Corporate just wants to ensure we're presenting a unified front." I arrived at the office at 6 a.m., 2 hours before our scheduled departure for Morrison Healthcare. Loki was already there, sitting in his office with a revised presentation deck open on his laptop. "Change of plans," he said without preamble. "Corporate decided they want me to take the lead on this presentation. You'll still be there, obviously, but they feel like having the department manager as primary presenter provides better credibility with a client this size." The coffee mug slipped from my hand and shattered on his office floor. "It's just optics," he continued quickly, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your strategy, your research, your implementation plan, everything stays exactly the same. I'm literally just reading your script. But when Morrison Healthcare sees the department manager presenting, they'll have more confidence in our ability to deliver." 8 months of work, 7 years of promises, 18 years of believing that merit and dedication would eventually be rewarded. And once again, I was told to step aside while someone else took credit for my work. But this time was different. This time, I said yes, because this time I was finally ready to document exactly how Loki Stone had been sabotaging my career while pretending to advance it. The Morrison Healthcare presentation was a complete success, which somehow made everything worse. I sat in the back of their conference room, watching Loki deliver my strategy with the confidence of someone who'd spent months developing it himself. Every graph, every projection, every implementation timeline that I'd agonized over for 18 hours a day was presented as seamlessly as if he'd created them in his sleep. The Morrison Healthcare executives were impressed, more than impressed, They were excited. They asked intelligent questions that I could have answered in my sleep, but instead, I watched Loki field them with responses he'd clearly memorized from my preparation notes. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need," said Rebecca Morrison, the CEO, as she shook Loki's hand after we'd secured the contract. "Your approach to integrating operational efficiency with financial restructuring is brilliant. We're looking forward to working with you on this implementation." Your approach, working with you. I managed to smile and nod appropriately during the congratulations and contract signing, but inside I was screaming. 8 months of my life, the most comprehensive consulting proposal I'd ever developed, and Rebecca Morrison didn't even know my name. To her, I was just the quiet analyst taking notes in the corner while the real expert handled the important conversations. "We did it," Loki said on the drive back to the office, practically glowing with satisfaction. $15 million, and they're already talking about expansion opportunities. This is going to change everything for the department. For the department. Not for me. For the department. "When do you think we'll hear about the regional director position?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Soon," he said, but something flickered across his expression. "I need to have some conversations with corporate first, make sure they understand your contribution to this success. But Zyra, this Morrison contract is going to be your ticket to executive leadership. Trust me." After 8 years, those 2 words had become my personal nightmare. That evening, I was back in the office trying to transition the Morrison Healthcare project files from my personal drive to the shared department system. The client portal needed to be updated, implementation timelines had to be distributed to the team, and someone needed to schedule the kickoff meetings with Morrison's various department heads. As usual, the administrative details of Loki's success were my responsibility. I was working on his computer because mine was running a system update, and I needed access to the departmental calendar to schedule meetings. Loki had left around 6 p.m. for drinks with some executives, celebrating the Morrison victory naturally, so his office was empty and his computer was still logged in. I was in the middle of updating project timelines when a calendar notification popped up on his screen. "Executive Leadership Meeting, 9 a.m. tomorrow, Conference Room A." Nothing unusual about that except for the agenda preview that appeared beneath it. "Discussion, Regional Director Position, Final Candidate Selection." My heart stopped. I stared at that notification for a full minute, trying to process what I was seeing. Final candidate selection meant they were choosing someone tomorrow, which meant the position was being filled immediately. Which meant Loki had been lying when he said we needed to wait for the right timing, the right budget cycle, the right opportunity. The position was open, right now, and I wasn't even being considered. My hands were shaking as I clicked on the calendar event, opening the full agenda. What I saw there made me physically sick. Agenda Item 1. Review applications for Regional Director position. Agenda Item 2. Interview feedback compilation. Agenda Item 3. Final candidate recommendation. Agenda Item 4. Transition timeline discussion. Interview feedback compilation. They'd already conducted interviews, multiple interviews based on the plural phrasing, and I'd never been contacted, never been invited, never even been informed that the position was officially open. I sat there in Loki's ergonomic chair, staring at evidence that 8 years of promises had been lies, and I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, crack, like ice forming hairline fractures before it shatters completely. But I needed to know more. I needed to understand exactly how thoroughly I'd been deceived. I opened Loki's email, telling myself I was just looking for project-related communications, just trying to understand the timeline for Morrison Healthcare implementation, just doing my job. What I found was so much worse than I could have imagined. The email thread was labeled RD Position Confidential and dated back 6 months. 6 months of correspondence between Loki and Diana Chen, discussing candidates for the regional director role. 6 months of him actively participating in a hiring process while assuring me that my time was coming. But it wasn't just that he'd hidden the position from me, it was what he'd said about me in those emails that made me want to throw his computer through the window. "Zyra Hayes continues to do excellent work as senior analyst," I read in an email from 3 months ago. "However, I have ongoing concerns about her readiness for executive leadership. While her technical skills are strong, she lacks the strategic vision and client relationship capabilities necessary for regional director responsibilities. I recommend we continue her development in her current role while looking externally for RD candidates." Lacks strategic vision. The Morrison Healthcare proposal that had just secured a $15 million contract was apparently evidence of my lack of strategic vision. Client relationship capabilities. I'd been managing client relationships independently for 3 years, with consistently higher satisfaction scores than anyone else in the department. I scrolled down to find more. Xrira works well under supervision but has shown little initiative for independent leadership, read another email. She's comfortable executing plans developed by others but struggles with original strategic thinking. I think she's found her ceiling at the senior analyst level. Little initiative for independent leadership. I'd been running department operations while he played golf with executives. Struggles with original strategic thinking. Every strategic initiative the department had implemented in the past 2 years had originated from my proposals, but the email that destroyed me completely was from just 2 weeks ago, sent the day after I'd presented my preliminary Morrison Healthcare research to him. I wanted to update you on the Morrison Healthcare project development. As expected, Zyra has done solid analytical work, but the strategic framework and implementation approach required significant guidance and refinement from me. This reinforces my assessment that she's valuable in a support capacity, but not ready for independent project leadership. The Morrison success should be positioned as a departmental achievement under my direction rather than evidence of Zyra's individual capabilities. Significant guidance and refinement. He'd changed exactly 3 minor formatting details in my presentation. Support capacity. I developed every aspect of the Morrison strategy independently, under my direction. He'd been in client meetings for a total of 4 hours throughout the entire 8-month development process. I sat there reading email after email of Loki systematically undermining my qualifications while taking credit for my work, and I finally understood what had been happening for 8 years. This wasn't a mentor who was being cautious about my development. This wasn't a boss who was waiting for the right opportunity to promote me. This was someone who had built his entire departmental success on my capabilities while ensuring I could never threaten his position by advancing beyond his control. Every promise, every assurance, every trust me and your time is coming, had been calculated manipulation designed to keep me productive and loyal, while he benefited from my work and blocked my advancement. The Morrison Healthcare project wasn't going to be my ticket to executive leadership. It was going to be the crowning achievement of Loki Stone's career, with my contributions carefully erased from the official record. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally looked up, the office was dark except for the glow of his computer screen. The motion sensor lights had turned off, leaving me alone with the evidence of 8 years of systematic betrayal. For the first time in my professional life, I wasn't thinking about being patient or proving myself or waiting for the right opportunity. I was thinking about revenge. And I was thinking about how to document everything I'd just discovered before Loki realized what I'd seen. Because tomorrow, when they selected the regional director candidate, I was going to make sure they understood exactly who had been doing the work they thought Loki Stone was responsible for. I should have left his office immediately, should have taken screenshots of the emails I'd already found and gotten out before anyone discovered what I was doing. But something compulsive had taken hold of me, a need to understand exactly how deep this deception went, how long it had been happening, and whether I was the only victim of Loki's systematic career sabotage. So I kept digging. His email system was organized with the meticulous precision I'd come to expect from him. Folders within folders, everything categorized and labeled, years of correspondence sorted by topic, client, and level of confidentiality. But now that I knew what to look for, that organization became my roadmap to 8 years of documented manipulation. I started with the Personnel Confidential folder, and what I found there made me realize that my situation wasn't unique. It was standard operating procedure. The first file that caught my attention was labeled Keegan Walsh Performance Management. Keegan had been a senior analyst when I first started at Meridian, someone I'd looked up to during my early months because of his expertise in healthcare financial analysis. He'd left the company after about 18 months, and I'd always assumed he'd been recruited away by a competitor offering better opportunities. I opened his file and immediately understood why he'd really left. Email after email documented Loki's systematic undermining of Keegan's advancement opportunities, using almost identical language to what I'd just read about myself. Strong technical skills, but lacks strategic vision. Works well under supervision but shows little initiative for independent leadership. Valuable in support capacity but not ready for management responsibilities. But the most damning evidence was a series of emails between Loki and HR, documenting Keegan's repeated requests for promotion consideration and Loki's responses blocking each attempt. Keegan Walsh has approached me again about advancement to lead analyst, read one email from 2 years into my tenure. While he continues to do good work, I have concerns about his client relationship capabilities. He tends to focus too heavily on technical details without understanding the broader business context. I recommend maintaining him in his current role while we develop his strategic thinking skills. The response from HR was telling. Understood. We'll table his advancement for this cycle, continue documenting development areas for future reference, continue documenting development areas. They had a system for this. I found similar files for 3 other former employees, all senior analysts who'd worked under Loki during my time at Meridian. Marcus Rodriguez, who'd left after 2 years for a position with a rival firm. Samantha Kim, who'd transferred to the Portland office after being repeatedly passed over for promotion. David Chen, who'd eventually quit to start his own consulting practice. All of them had been systematically blocked from advancement by the same man who'd been promising me that my time was coming for 8 years. But it wasn't just former employees. I found active files for current team members, and the pattern was horrifyingly consistent. Jennifer Liu, who'd been with the company for 4 years, had a file documenting why she wasn't ready for lead analyst. Technically competent but struggles with big-picture thinking. Better suited for execution than strategy development. I knew Jennifer's work intimately. She'd developed the client retention strategy that had become our department's standard protocol. She'd identified the inefficiencies in our reporting system that led to a 30% improvement in project completion times. She was brilliant, innovative, and absolutely ready for advancement. But according to Loki's documentation, she was better suited for execution than strategy. Michael Torres, our most experienced senior analyst, had a file explaining why he wasn't management material despite 5 years of exceptional performance. Strong individual contributor but lacks the leadership presence necessary for management roles. Better utilized in high-level analytical work. Michael had been informally managing the junior analysts for 2 years, providing guidance and training that helped our department maintain the lowest turnover rate in the company, but he lacked leadership presence. The most sickening discovery was a file labeled Succession Planning Strategic Notes, which contained Loki's long-term planning for department management. It was essentially a manual for maintaining control while appearing to develop talent. Key principle: maintain high-performance standards while controlling advancement pathways, I read. Team members should feel valued and developed without creating internal competition for management roles. Focus on skill development that enhances current role effectiveness rather than preparing for advancement. He had a systematic approach to keeping people just satisfied enough to stay productive, while just frustrated enough to never threaten his position. But the most revealing section was titled, Managing High Performers. High-performing analysts require careful management to prevent advancement expectations from affecting loyalty and productivity. Strategy: position advancement as requiring readiness development that can be extended indefinitely. Provide increased responsibilities as development opportunities, while maintaining that official advancement requires demonstration of capabilities not yet achieved. Document performance concerns that can be referenced if advancement questions arise externally. Document performance concerns. Create a paper trail that justified keeping talented people exactly where they were most useful to him. I scrolled through years of this documentation, finding email after email where Loki had blocked promotions, transferred promising employees to other departments, or pushed them toward external opportunities rather than allowing them to advance within his sphere of influence. But the real revelation came when I opened the folder labeled Executive Communications Confidential. This contained his correspondence with Diana Chen and other executive leadership, and it painted a picture of how Loki had built his reputation as an exceptional manager while systematically suppressing the people who actually generated his department's success. The financial analysis department continues to exceed performance targets under my leadership, read one quarterly report. Client satisfaction remains high due to our emphasis on thorough analytical work and strategic thinking. I've maintained strong team cohesion while developing analytical capabilities that support our growing client base. Our emphasis, our strategic thinking, our growing client base. Not a single mention of the individual contributors who generated those results. Not a word about the innovations that had come from his team. Everything was positioned as evidence of his leadership effectiveness rather than recognition of the talented people whose work he was taking credit for. Another email, sent just 3 months ago, made me want to throw his computer against the wall. I wanted to update you on our recent successes and future planning. The Morrison Healthcare contract represents exactly the kind of strategic thinking we've been developing in financial analysis. My approach to integrated consulting demonstrates the innovative leadership that Meridian needs as we expand our healthcare sector presence. I believe this positions our department as a model for other regional offices. My approach, my strategic thinking, my innovative leadership. The Morrison Healthcare proposal that I'd spent 8 months developing, that had secured the biggest contract in our regional office's history, was being presented to executive leadership as evidence of Loki Stone's strategic brilliance. But then I found something that made everything else pale in comparison. Hidden in a subfolder labeled Long-Term Planning was a document titled Regional Director Transition Strategy. It was dated 18 months ago, long before I'd even started working on Morrison Healthcare, long before any of the recent promises about my advancement timeline. Objective: position for regional director advancement within 18-24 months. Key strategy: demonstrate departmental success through high-profile client achievements while maintaining team stability. Required evidence: major contract success, consistent performance metrics, documentation of leadership effectiveness, potential obstacles, internal advancement expectations from senior analysts, particularly X. Hayes. Mitigation: continue development positioning for key team members while managing advancement expectations. Document performance gaps that support external hiring for leadership roles. Potential obstacles: internal advancement expectations from X. Hayes. I was literally listed as an obstacle to his advancement strategy. Mitigation: manage advancement expectations while documenting performance gaps. For 18 months, every promise, every development opportunity, every assurance about my future had been part of a documented strategy to manage my expectations while he used my work to position himself for the regional director role. But the final piece of evidence was the most devastating. At the bottom of the document was a section titled Recommended Timeline, Months 1 to 12. Secure major client contract using existing team capabilities while positioning achievements as leadership success. Months 13 to 20. Document succession planning that supports external hiring for key leadership roles. Months 19 to 24. Execute regional director advancement while ensuring smooth transition of current responsibilities to external hires or lateral transfers. Ensure smooth transition of current responsibilities to external hires or lateral transfers. He'd been planning to get rid of me the entire time, not just block my advancement. Actively plan my removal from the department once my usefulness in securing his promotion had expired. I sat there in the dark, surrounded by years of documented evidence that my entire career had been orchestrated by someone who saw me as a resource to be exploited and then discarded. Every late night, every missed family gathering, every sacrifice I'd made believing I was building toward something had been carefully calculated to benefit him, while ensuring I could never become competition. The most horrifying realization was how good he'd been at it, how perfectly he'd managed my psychology, keeping me just hopeful enough to stay motivated while just insecure enough to never question his guidance, how he'd isolated me from other opportunities by positioning himself as my advocate while secretly ensuring those opportunities never materialized. I thought about Keegan Walsh, who'd probably left wondering why his technical skills and dedication hadn't been enough, about Marcus Rodriguez, who'd likely spent months questioning his strategic thinking abilities before finding validation at a competitor, about all the talented people who'd been convinced they weren't ready for advancement by the same person who'd been stealing credit for their innovations. But more than that, I thought about tomorrow morning's executive meeting, where Loki would present himself as the obvious choice for regional director based on achievements that belonged to other people, where he'd secure the promotion that would give him even more power to manipulate and suppress talent, where his strategy of exploitation would be rewarded with advancement to a level where he could destroy even more careers. I looked at the clock, 11:47 p.m. The executive meeting was in 9 hours and 13 minutes. But I wasn't going to let Loki Stone get that promotion based on my work while I was repositioned as an obstacle to be managed. I was going to make sure that by 9 a.m. tomorrow Diana Chen understood exactly who had been generating the success Loki was claiming credit for, and I was going to do it using his own documentation against him. I spent the next 3 hours methodically copying every piece of evidence I'd found. Not just screenshots, full email threads, complete documents, systematic proof of 8 years of manipulation and suppression. I organized it chronologically, created a timeline of promises versus reality, and built a comprehensive case that would be impossible to deny or dismiss. But more importantly, I crafted a strategy that would expose Loki's pattern of exploitation, while positioning myself not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as a strategic leader who'd uncovered systematic management failures that were limiting company growth and talent retention. By 3 a.m., I had everything I needed to ensure that tomorrow's regional director selection would go very differently than Loki Stone had planned. And for the first time in 8 years, I was the one with the strategic advantage. By 3 a.m., I'd copied everything, every email thread, every document, every piece of evidence that proved Loki Stone had built his career on systematic talent suppression while claiming credit for other people's work. But having evidence and knowing how to use it strategically were two completely different things. I drove home through empty Seattle streets, my mind racing through possibilities and consequences. I could email everything to Diana Chen immediately, hope she'd read it before the 9 a.m. meeting, and pray that 8 years of documented manipulation would speak for itself. But that felt reactive, desperate, like exactly the kind of emotional decision that Loki would expect from someone he'd been managing and manipulating for so long. No, if I was going to do this, I was going to do it right, strategically, professionally, with the same level of calculated planning that Loki had used against me for 8 years. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and 3 cups of coffee, and I planned the most important presentation of my career. First, I needed to understand my audience. Diana Chen hadn't become CEO of a major consulting firm by being sentimental or easily manipulated. She cared about results, efficiency, and company growth. If I walked into her office talking about personal betrayal and hurt feelings, she'd dismiss me as a disgruntled employee with sour grapes about promotion timing. But if I presented her with evidence that one of her regional managers was systematically suppressing talent, taking credit for other people's work, and creating legal liability through potential discrimination claims, that would get her attention. I spent 2 hours crafting what I mentally labeled the business case against Loki Stone. The document opened with an executive summary that focused on measurable business impact. Analysis of Financial Analysis Department performance indicates systematic talent suppression resulting in decreased innovation, increased turnover costs, and potential legal liability related to advancement discrimination. No emotion, no personal grievances, just business metrics and legal concerns. I divided the evidence into 4 categories. Category 1, revenue attribution discrepancies. This section documented how achievements were being misattributed to management rather than the analysts who generated them. I used the Morrison Healthcare contract as the primary example, but included 6 other major clients where I could prove that the strategic work had been done by team members while credit went to Loki. The business impact was clear. If senior analysts weren't receiving appropriate recognition for major achievements, they were likely to leave for competitors who would properly value their contributions. The cost of replacing a senior analyst recruitment, training, knowledge transfer, client relationship rebuilding, averaged $127,000 according to industry studies. Category 2, systematic advancement blocking. Here I presented the pattern of promotion denials I'd discovered, but framed it in terms of talent retention and competitive disadvantage. When high-performing employees are repeatedly denied advancement despite meeting or exceeding all stated requirements, it creates both turnover risk and reduced productivity from disengaged workers. I included anonymized data showing that our department had the lowest internal promotion rate in the company, despite having the highest performance metrics. That wasn't evidence of high standards. It was evidence of artificial advancement barriers that were preventing the company from developing internal leadership talent. Category 3, innovation suppression. This was where I documented how strategic initiatives and process improvements were being credited to management rather than their actual creators. I showed how this created disincentives for innovation and analytical creativity, potentially limiting the department's competitive advantage in client consulting. The Morrison Healthcare integrated consulting model that was being positioned as Loki's innovation. I had timestamps and email records proving every aspect had been developed by team members, with Loki's only contributions being minor formatting changes and presentation delivery. Category 4, legal liability assessment. The most serious section focused on potential discrimination issues. When advancement decisions consistently favor external candidates over internal high performers, Especially when those internal candidates are women or minorities, it creates significant legal exposure for the company. I documented the demographic patterns in Loki's advancement decisions. 73% of external hires for leadership roles had been white males, while 82% of high-performing internal candidates who'd been passed over were women or people of color. Those numbers weren't just troubling from an equity perspective, they represented potential class action lawsuit territory. But having a strong business case was only half the strategy. I also needed to position myself not as a victim seeking vindication, but as a strategic asset who'd uncovered critical intelligence about management inefficiencies. I created a second document titled Recommendations for Organizational Improvement, which outlined specific changes that would prevent similar issues from occurring in other departments. Performance Attribution Systems, Advancement Transparency Requirements. Performance Attribution Systems, Advancement Transparency Requirements, 360-degree feedback processes, and talent development metrics that would ensure high performers were properly recognized and advanced. This wasn't about punishing Loki Stone. This was about implementing systemic changes that would improve company performance and reduce legal liability. By 5 a.m., I had 47 pages of documentation, analysis, and recommendations, but I still needed to solve the timing problem. The regional director selection meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. If I waited until after the meeting, any action I took would look like sour grapes from someone who hadn't been selected. But if I tried to interrupt the meeting or demand last-minute consideration, I'd look desperate and unprofessional. I needed Diana Chen to understand the situation before the meeting, but in a way that felt like strategic intelligence rather than last-minute panic. The solution came to me while I was in the shower. I wouldn't ask for the meeting to be delayed or the process to be reconsidered. I'd request an urgent consultation about legal liability issues that had come to my attention during project transition work. At 6:30 a.m., I sent a carefully worded email to Diana Chen's executive assistant. I need to schedule an urgent consultation with Ms. Chen regarding potential legal liability issues I've uncovered during Morrison Healthcare project documentation. The matters require immediate attention before any personnel decisions are finalized today. Please advise on availability for a brief meeting before 9 a.m. Legal liability, immediate attention, personnel decisions. Every phrase was chosen to communicate urgency without revealing specifics that might get filtered out by her assistant. Her response came back within 20 minutes. Ms. Chen can meet with you at 7:45 a.m. in her office. Please bring all relevant documentation. I had 1 hour and 15 minutes to prepare for the most important conversation of my professional life. I dressed like I was presenting to the board of directors, my best suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in what my mother called my serious business style. I printed 2 copies of all documentation, organized in clearly labeled sections with executive summaries and key findings highlighted. I practiced my opening statement until I could deliver it without notes, focusing on business impact rather than personal grievance. But most importantly, I prepared for every possible response Diana might have. If she accused me of timing this to interfere with the regional director selection, I discovered this information during routine project transition work and felt obligated to report potential legal liability immediately rather than delay for scheduling convenience. If she suggested I was motivated by personal advancement desires, my concern is institutional risk rather than individual advancement. These patterns represent significant talent management failures that extend beyond any single personnel decision. If she questioned why I hadn't reported concerns through normal channels, the evidence indicates systematic issues at the management level that require executive review to ensure objective assessment. By 7:30 a.m., I was sitting in the Meridian lobby, reviewing my notes one final time. I felt eerily calm, like the eye of a hurricane where everything is still and clear while chaos swirls around the edges. For 8 years, I'd been reactive, responsive, always waiting for someone else to make decisions about my career. Today, I was taking control. At exactly 7:45 a.m., I knocked on Diana Chen's office door. She was already reviewing something on her tablet, probably preparation materials for the regional director meeting. Her office was exactly what I'd expected from someone who'd built a consulting empire: floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of Elliott Bay, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than my car, and an atmosphere of focused efficiency that made every second feel valuable. "Miss Hayes," she said, not looking up from her tablet, "you have 10 minutes. What's the legal liability issue?" This was it. 8 years of systematic manipulation, months of stolen credit, and a lifetime of believing in meritocracy that had been revealed as carefully orchestrated deception. Everything came down to the next 10 minutes. I took a breath, opened the folder containing 47 pages of evidence, and began the presentation that would either destroy my career or finally give me the recognition I'd earned. I've uncovered evidence of systematic talent suppression in the financial analysis department that represents significant legal liability and competitive disadvantage for Meridian, I said, sliding the executive summary across her desk. The documentation indicates patterns of advancement discrimination, achievement misattribution, and management practices that violate our stated policies on talent development and recognition. Diana Chen looked up from her tablet for the first time since I'd entered her office. "Show me," she said, and for the next 10 minutes I systematically dismantled 8 years of Loki Stone's carefully constructed career, while positioning myself not as a victim, but as the strategic leader who'd identified and documented critical organizational failures. When I finished, Diana was quiet for a long moment, reviewing the summary pages I'd provided. "This is quite thorough," she said finally. "How long have you been gathering this information?" "I discovered the initial evidence yesterday evening during Morrison Healthcare project transition work," I said. "I spent the night conducting additional research to understand the scope of the issues, and your recommendation. This was the moment that would determine everything. I could ask for justice, demand Loki's termination, or request immediate promotion consideration. But all of those responses would make this about me rather than about the company. I recommend immediate suspension of the regional director selection pending investigation of these findings," I said. "If advancement decisions have been compromised by systematic talent suppression, any personnel choices made without addressing these issues could compound the legal liability." Diana Chen leaned back in her chair, studying me with the kind of attention that made me understand how she'd built a consulting empire. "Miss Hayes," she said, "cancel my 9 a.m. meeting. We're going to need significantly more time to discuss this." And that's when I knew that everything was about to change. Diana Chen's office became a war room for the next 4 hours. She called in Rebecca Martinez, our head of human resources, and James Park, the company's general counsel. By 8:30 a.m., the three of them had reviewed every piece of documentation I'd compiled, asked questions that challenged every assumption I'd made, and conducted what felt like the most thorough professional interrogation of my life. But they weren't interrogating my evidence. They were stress testing it, making sure every piece would hold up under legal scrutiny, that every pattern was documented sufficiently to withstand pushback, and that my analysis was sound enough to justify the massive organizational disruption they were contemplating. "The Morrison Healthcare timeline is particularly damning," Rebecca said, reviewing the email threads that showed Loki taking credit for my strategy. "We have 8 months of documented development work by Ms. Hayes, followed by Loki's presentation to executive leadership positioning it as his strategic innovation. That's not a gray area, that's outright misrepresentation." James was focused on the legal implications. The advancement blocking patterns combined with the demographic data create significant liability exposure. If even one of these bypassed candidates decides to file a discrimination claim, discovery would uncover all of this documentation. We'd be looking at potential class action territory. But Diana was asking different questions. Questions about department performance, client relationships, and operational continuity. She wasn't just thinking about liability, she was thinking about how to turn this crisis into competitive advantage. "Walk me through the Morrison Healthcare client relationship," she said. "Who's their primary contact? Who do they trust? Who's been managing the day-to-day relationship throughout the development process?" "I have," I said. "Loki maintained the executive-level relationship with Rebecca Morrison, but all operational communication, technical discussions, and implementation planning has been routed through me for the past 8 months. So if we were to remove Loki from that account, would there be continuity issues?" I understood where she was going. No. If anything, it would improve continuity. The Morrison team has been working with me on all substantive issues. Loki's involvement has been primarily ceremonial. Diana exchanged glances with Rebecca and James. Some kind of silent communication that told me they'd already made a decision about how this was going to play out. "Miss Hayes," Diana said, "I'm going to ask you to wait in conference room B while we have a conversation with Mr. Stone. Don't leave the building, we're going to need you available for follow-up discussions." By 10:30 a.m., I was sitting alone in conference room B, watching Seattle's morning fog lift off Elliott Bay, and trying to process the fact that I'd just systematically dismantled my boss's career using his own documentation. Part of me felt vindicated. Finally, someone with authority understood what had been happening to me for 8 years, but a larger part felt terrified about what came next. I'd burned the bridge. There was no going back to the previous dynamic where I accepted Loki's explanations and waited patiently for advancement that would never come. Either this investigation would validate everything I'd presented and lead to significant organizational changes, or I'd be branded as a disloyal employee who'd tried to sabotage her manager's career out of personal ambition. At 11:45 a.m., Rebecca Martinez knocked on the conference room door. "Zaria, could you join us in Diana's office? We need to discuss next steps." I walked back down the hallway on unsteady legs, my mind racing through possibilities. Had they confronted Loki? Had he provided explanations that undermined my evidence? Had they decided this was an internal personnel dispute rather than systematic management failure? When I entered Diana's office, Loki was nowhere to be seen, just Diana, Rebecca, and James, all wearing expressions that gave away nothing. "Please sit down," Diana said. "We've concluded our initial investigation, and we need to discuss immediate organizational changes." Initial investigation. Immediate organizational changes. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. "First," Diana continued, "we want to acknowledge that your decision to bring these issues to our attention demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking and institutional loyalty that we value in leadership positions. The evidence you compiled was thorough, professional, and focused on business impact rather than personal grievance." Strategic thinking, leadership positions. I tried not to read too much into those specific word choices. "Second, we've had a comprehensive discussion with Loki Stone about the documentation you provided. He was unable to offer credible explanations for the patterns you identified, particularly regarding achievement attribution and advancement blocking. He's been placed on administrative leave pending further investigation." Administrative leave. Loki Stone, who'd controlled my career for 8 years, who'd systematically stolen credit for my work while blocking my advancement, was on administrative leave because of evidence I'd provided. "Third," Rebecca interjected, "we're implementing immediate changes to department leadership structure. The regional director position is being filled internally, effective immediately, with someone who has demonstrated both the strategic capabilities and ethical leadership that we require." Filled internally, effective immediately. I was afraid to breathe. "Zaira," Diana said, and her tone shifted from formal to something that might have been approval, "we're offering you the position of Regional Director for Financial Analysis effective Monday morning. Your first responsibility will be conducting a comprehensive review of all departmental practices to ensure we don't have similar issues in other areas." Regional Director, the position I'd been working toward for 8 years. The title that represented everything I'd sacrificed and struggled for. The office on the 15th floor, the authority to make real decisions, the salary that would finally reflect my actual contributions. But also, my first responsibility will be conducting a comprehensive review. They weren't just promoting me, they were positioning me to investigate whether Loki's practices were isolated incidents or part of broader organizational problems. "The salary is $185,000 annually," Rebecca continued, "plus performance bonuses tied to department metrics and client satisfaction. You'll have a team of 12 analysts reporting to you, with authority to make hiring and advancement decisions within approved budget parameters. More than double my current salary. More money than my parents had ever imagined possible when they were working 16-hour days at the Olive Branch so I could get an education." However, Diana said, and I braced myself for the conditions that would complicate this seemingly perfect resolution, "there are some immediate staffing changes that will require careful management. Loki Stone's employment with Meridian will be terminated at the conclusion of our investigation," James explained, "but we need to ensure continuity on all active projects, particularly Morrison Healthcare. The client relationship transition will need to be handled delicately to maintain their confidence in our capabilities. Loki's employment will be terminated. The man who'd blocked my advancement for 8 years, who'd stolen credit for my innovations, who'd positioned me as an obstacle to his strategic planning, was being fired based on evidence I'd provided. We're also restructuring some of the senior analyst positions," Rebecca continued. "Jennifer Liu and Michael Torres will be promoted to lead analyst effective immediately, with clear advancement pathways to management roles. We want to ensure that high-performing team members understand that merit-based advancement is a priority." Jennifer and Michael, two of the people whose files I'd found, whose advancement had been blocked by the same systematic suppression I'd experienced. They were getting the opportunities they'd deserved for years. But there was one more piece that needed to be addressed. What about the Morrison healthcare contract? I asked. Loki was supposed to be the primary relationship manager. How do we handle that transition? Diana smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from her since walking into her office 8 hours earlier. That's already handled, she said. I called Rebecca Morrison this morning and explained that you'd be taking over as primary relationship manager due to a restructuring of our regional leadership. She was delighted. Apparently, she's been hoping to work more directly with you since the initial presentation. Rebecca Morrison was delighted. The CEO of Morrison Healthcare, who'd signed a $15 million contract based on my strategic proposal, wanted to work directly with me rather than through Loki. There's one more thing, Diana continued. The Morrison success has attracted attention from our corporate office. They want to use your integrated consulting model as a template for expanding our healthcare sector services nationally. You'll be presenting your approach to the board of directors next month. Presenting to the board of directors. My integrated consulting model. My approach. After 8 years of watching Loki take credit for my innovations while telling me I wasn't ready for strategic thinking, I was being asked to present my strategic approach to the people who controlled the entire company's direction. Questions? Diana asked. I had 1,000 questions. About team transition, about client communication, about the investigation timeline for Loki's termination, but the only question that really mattered was one I almost didn't dare ask. When does Loki's administrative leave end? His last day will be Friday, Rebecca said, but he's not permitted in the building during the investigation period. All of his responsibilities have been reassigned. To whom? Diana's smile became something that might have been satisfaction. To you. As regional director, you'll be handling the transition of all his ongoing responsibilities to appropriate team members, including performance management for any remaining projects he was overseeing. Performance management. I would be responsible for evaluating and potentially correcting any remaining issues from Loki's management approach. This means, Diana continued, that if we determine his employment should be terminated, you'll be involved in those decisions. Given your documentation of systematic talent suppression, your perspective on appropriate consequences will be valuable. I would be involved in the decision to terminate Loki Stone's employment. The man who'd controlled my career for 8 years would potentially be fired based on recommendations from the person he'd spent so long trying to keep in a subordinate position. The irony was so complete it felt like fiction. I accept, I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. When do I start? You already have, Diana said. Conference room A is yours for the rest of the day to begin planning your team transition. Rebecca will handle the administrative details of your promotion, and James will brief you on the investigation procedures you'll need to follow. And Zyra, Diana added as I was gathering my things to leave. Well done. This is exactly the kind of strategic leadership and institutional loyalty that builds careers at Meridian. Strategic leadership, institutional loyalty, builds careers. 8 years after Loki Stone first told me I wasn't ready for strategic thinking, Diana Chen was praising my strategic leadership. As I walked out of her office toward conference room A, my conference room now, I passed Loki's office. The door was closed, the lights were off, and there was already a box on his desk where someone had begun packing his personal items. In 3 days, I'd gone from senior financial analyst to regional director, from being blocked for advancement to being responsible for the advancement of 12 team members, from having my achievements attributed to someone else to having my strategic approach become a company-wide template. But the strangest part was how empty the victory felt. I'd gotten everything I'd wanted, using methods I'd never imagined I'd need to employ, and while justice had been served, while the systematic suppression had been exposed and corrected, I couldn't shake the feeling that winning this way had changed something fundamental about who I was. Loki Stone had made me into someone who documented everything, who assumed deception, who planned strategic responses to workplace relationships. He'd made me into someone very much like himself, and I wasn't sure whether that was the real victory or the real tragedy of this entire situation. That was 18 months ago. 18 months since I walked into Diana Chen's office with 47 pages of evidence and systematically dismantled the career of the man who'd controlled mine for 8 years. 18 months since I went from senior financial analyst to regional director in the span of a single conversation. 18 months since I learned that sometimes getting everything you've ever wanted feels nothing like you imagined it would. I'm sitting in my corner office now, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Columbia River, the one with my name etched in glass beside a title I earned through documentation and strategic thinking rather than patience and loyalty. The office that should represent vindication, justice, the triumph of merit over manipulation. Instead, it feels like a monument to how thoroughly Loki Stone changed me into someone I never intended to become. My calendar shows a meeting in 10 minutes. Weekly status review, L. Stone. Every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Loki Stone sits across from my desk and reports on his progress as senior project coordinator, a position 3 levels below where he used to be, a role with no direct reports and no strategic authority. He asks permission for vacation days, seeks approval for client communications, and waits for my feedback on project proposals. The power reversal is so complete it should feel satisfying, but mostly it just feels exhausting. Because here's what nobody tells you about revenge in the workplace. It doesn't end when you get justice. It continues every day afterward, in every interaction with the person who wronged you, in every decision you make about their professional future, in every moment when you have to choose between being fair and being vindictive. 3 weeks after my promotion, when the investigation concluded and Loki's termination was finalized, Diana Chen offered me a choice. "We can handle his departure quietly," she said. "Severance package, neutral reference, clean break. Or, if you think he has value as an individual contributor, we can restructure his role and keep him on under your supervision." I should have taken the clean break, should have let him leave with whatever dignity remained and moved forward without the daily reminder of 8 years of systematic manipulation. But I didn't. "I think he has valuable institutional knowledge," I told Diana, "and I believe in redemption through accountability." Redemption through accountability. Even now, I'm not sure if that was wisdom or cruelty disguised as professionalism. The truth is, I wanted him to experience what I'd experienced for 8 years. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to have someone else control your advancement opportunities, to watch your ideas get attributed to other people, to sit in meetings where your contributions were minimized while someone else received credit for work you'd done. So Loki Stone became my direct report, and for the past 18 months, I've been his manager in the same company where he'd spent 8 years ensuring I'd never advance beyond senior analyst level. The irony should have been delicious. Instead, it's been corrosive. Because managing someone who systematically undermined you requires a level of professionalism that borders on the superhuman. Every quarterly review, every project assignment, every conversation about his performance has to be conducted with absolute fairness and documented meticulously, because any hint of retribution would undermine everything I'd accomplished. But fairness, I've learned, is exhausting when it's extended to people who showed you none. Last month, Loki submitted a proposal for improving our client onboarding process. It was actually good, innovative, well-researched, potentially valuable to department efficiency. The old me, the person who believed in merit and collaboration, would have been excited to implement his suggestions and give him appropriate credit. The new me spent 3 days investigating whether the ideas were actually his or whether he'd appropriated them from someone else on the team. That's who I've become. Someone who assumes deception, who documents every interaction, who approaches workplace relationships with strategic calculation rather than genuine collaboration. Someone who got everything she wanted by becoming exactly like the person who'd wronged her. But the changes go deeper than just my relationship with Loki. Jennifer Liu and Michael Torres, who were promoted to lead analyst positions after my investigation, approach me differently now. There's respect, certainly, and gratitude for the opportunities they've finally received, but there's also wariness, a careful professionalism that suggests they understand I'm someone who can systematically destroy careers when I determine it's necessary. "You've got to be careful with Zyra," I overheard Michael telling a new hire last month. "She's fair, and she'll advocate for you if you deserve it. But don't cross her. She documents everything, and she plays chess while other people are playing checkers. She plays chess while other people are playing checkers." That should have felt like a compliment. Instead, it felt like an epitaph for the person I used to be. The person who stayed late because she cared about the work, not because she was building evidence. The person who trusted her mentor's guidance instead of analyzing every conversation for hidden agendas. The person who believed that good intentions and hard work were sufficient for professional success. That person died in Loki Stone's office at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, surrounded by 8 years of documented evidence that merit was just another tool for manipulation. The department is thriving under my leadership. That much is undeniable. We've exceeded revenue targets for 6 consecutive quarters. Our client satisfaction scores are the highest in company history, and our employee retention rate has improved dramatically since we implemented transparent advancement criteria and merit-based recognition systems. Morrison Healthcare has become our flagship success story. They've expanded their contract twice, referred 4 other healthcare networks to us, and specifically requested that our integrated consulting model be used for their new facilities in Oregon and California. Next month, I'm presenting to a consortium of healthcare executives about scaling our approach nationally. Everything I told Diana Chen 18 months ago has come to pass. The systematic talent suppression has been eliminated, advancement decisions are now transparent and merit-based, and the department is operating at levels of efficiency and innovation that were impossible under Loki's management. But success built on exposing someone else's systematic manipulation feels different from success built on collaborative achievement. When clients praise my strategic thinking, I wonder if they're comparing me to someone who is taking credit for other people's work. When colleagues acknowledge my leadership capabilities, I question whether they're responding to genuine competence or to fear of what I might document about them if they cross me. The Morrison Healthcare Board presentation I'm giving next month should be the pinnacle of my professional achievement, my strategic approach becoming a national template, my name associated with innovative consulting methodologies, my career finally reflecting my actual contributions rather than someone else's narrative about my limitations. Instead, I find myself dreading it, because I know that when I stand in front of those executives, part of what I'll be presenting isn't just my strategic thinking, it's my ability to systematically destroy someone who underestimated me. And I'm not sure which skill they'll find more impressive. Last week, my parents drove down from Bellingham to see my new office. My mother stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city skyline, and cried, "This is everything we worked for," she said, "everything we dreamed you could achieve." My father was more practical. He examined my diplomas on the wall, read the nameplate on my door, asked about my salary and my responsibilities. "You've made it," he said finally. "You've succeeded in ways we never could have imagined." But then he asked the question that's been haunting me. "Are you happy?" I didn't know how to answer, because I have everything I wanted: the title, the salary, the recognition, the authority to make decisions that affect real outcomes for real people. But I also have hypervigilance about hidden agendas, documentation systems that turn every workplace interaction into potential evidence, and the knowledge that I'm capable of strategic manipulation when I determine it's necessary. I've become excellent at my job, partly because I've become excellent at assuming the worst about people's motivations and planning accordingly. 3 months ago, we hired a new senior analyst named David Park. Brilliant kid, hungry, reminds me of myself 8 years ago. He stays late, volunteers for extra projects, asks thoughtful questions about strategic thinking and client relationship management. "I'd love to learn from you," he told me during his first month. "You're exactly the kind of leader I hope to become someday." The old me would have been flattered, would have seen an opportunity for genuine mentorship, would have been excited to guide someone's professional development, the way I'd wished someone had guided mine. The new me immediately started wondering what he really wanted, whether his enthusiasm was genuine or calculated, and how I could structure his development to ensure he never became a threat to department stability. That's who Loki Stone made me, someone who treats mentorship as a strategic exercise rather than a collaborative relationship. But here's the most complex part: my hypervigilance and strategic thinking have made me genuinely effective as a leader. The systems I've implemented to document performance and recognize achievement have created the most productive and satisfied team in the company. My assumption that people have hidden agendas has allowed me to identify and address problems before they become crises. My experience with systematic manipulation has made me excellent at recognizing and preventing similar patterns in other management relationships. I've become a better leader partly because I've learned to think like someone who would exploit leadership positions. The question that keeps me awake at night is whether that's wisdom or corruption. Next Tuesday, Loki Stone will sit across from my desk for our weekly status review. He'll report on his project progress, ask for feedback on his client communications, and maintain the careful professionalism of someone who understands that his continued employment depends on my satisfaction with his performance. And I'll provide fair, documented, strategic guidance while part of me wonders if this is justice or if I've simply become a more sophisticated version of the person I spent 8 years trying to escape. 6 months ago, Loki submitted a request to transfer to the Portland office. Different city, different team, clean slate away from the daily reminder of how spectacularly his career manipulation had backfired. It was a reasonable request from someone trying to rebuild his professional reputation in an environment where his history wasn't part of every conversation. I denied the transfer request, not because his work was inadequate, not because the department couldn't function without him, but because I wanted him to understand what it felt like to have someone else control your opportunities while maintaining plausible professional reasons for their decisions, just like he'd done to me for 8 years. That night, I went home and looked at myself in the mirror and asked whether I'd become the kind of manager I'd spent my career trying to escape. I still don't know the answer, but I know this: the person who stayed late because she cared about the work, who trusted her mentor's guidance, who believed merit would eventually be rewarded. That person was naive, maybe even stupid, but she was also capable of genuine collaboration and authentic relationships. The person who sits in this corner office, who documents everything, who assumes hidden agendas and plans strategic responses to workplace dynamics, she's effective, respected, successful, and utterly isolated from the kind of professional relationships that made work feel meaningful rather than just profitable. So here's my question for you. Have you ever gotten everything you wanted, only to discover that the process of getting it changed you into someone you didn't recognize? Have you ever had to choose between being naive enough to be hurt again or becoming cynical enough to hurt others first? Because I'm 18 months into having everything I thought I wanted, and I'm still trying to figure out whether this is the person I always was underneath, or whether Loki Stone's greatest victory was turning me into a version of himself. If you've made it this far, if you've listened to this entire complicated, messy story about workplace manipulation and strategic revenge and the cost of getting justice, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comments, what do you do when winning feels exactly like losing? When getting justice requires becoming the kind of person you spent years trying to defeat? When success comes with a price tag that includes fundamental changes to who you are? Because right now, sitting in this corner office that represents everything I worked for, I'm still trying to figure out whether I saved my career or destroyed my soul, and I need to know I'm not the only one asking that question. Thanks for listening. Really, it helps to say this out loud. To admit that sometimes the ending you want isn't the ending that makes you happy. Take care of yourselves out there. Document everything. Trust strategically. And remember that getting what you want and being satisfied with who you become in the process are two entirely different achievements. Next week's video will be about managing former colleagues who become your subordinates, because apparently that's my expertise now. Whether that's something to be proud of or something to be concerned about, well, that's what I'm still trying to figure out. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.